Ah, Predator. Remember Predator, everyone? It's one of the best examples of a quintessential 1980s action film that succeeded in blending the over-the-top fun of that genre with science fiction horror that gave birth to one of the most legendary and recognizable monsters put to film. The legacy this film made has transcended generations and spawned sequels, spin-offs, and crossovers, which in turn brought new fans to the franchise. Of course, these numerous forms of media have good and bad mixed in, with fans debating which of these could come close to holding a candle to the original film that made these other films, graphic novels, and video games possible. Speaking specifically on the Predator franchise, we have 3 sequels with a 4th film on the way. And that's what the focus of this video is going to be. More specifically, why, as the title implies, there's a bad moon on the rise. And since the anniversary of this film is just a couple of days away as of recording this, I figured it would be appropriate to cover this topic in some depth. Now, without further delay, let's mud up, get to the chopper, and dive straight into this. So, dear viewer, to give you an understanding of my perspective, I'm going to give you a history of my relationship to the Predator franchise, as well as compare and discuss the sequels to the first movie. This is to set the stage for my critique of the info that we have on the new film so far, as well as why I have the most ominous feeling that this film will hurt the Predator IP and could possibly send it to the grave. So from a young age, science fiction action franchises including but not limited to Star Wars, Terminator, and Alien, among others, captivated my mind. And aside from the fact that I already loved Arnold Schwarzenegger because of Terminator, seeing him in another army-esque film like Commando, but with a sci-fi horror twist, seemed like a match made in heaven. After all, this formula of combining the feel and aesthetic of an 80s action movie with horror monsters was used in James Cameron's Aliens, and it worked brilliantly. In retrospect, I'm glad that Predator was put in front of it. The enjoyment I get from watching Arnold fighting and surviving against an alien creature that is both superior in strength and strategy set me on a path to enjoy similar films going forward. As far as the sequels go, not including the Alien vs. Predator films, Predator 2 is my favorite. The reason being that, like its predecessor, it took the action genre and mixed it with sci-fi horror. The difference is that the action films that it took inspiration from is akin to the Lethal Weapon movies and other cop films like Die Hard, with the over-the-top action and one-liners commonly associated with the genre at the time. The movie also expanded the lore of the Predators, giving a small glimpse into their society and how a group of these hunters operate. While the film has its share of issues, it is superior to the other sequels because it did not try to copy the original movie, nor did it take the franchise into a direction that was completely removed from what made it popular and beloved in the first place. Looking at you, the Predator.
Shut the fuck up.
Speaking on the film Predators, it's obvious that the filmmakers want to go back to the roots of the series. At the same time, they understood that in order for this film to stand on its own, they needed to do something new. So instead of a jungle on Earth, the story would take place on a jungle preserve planet. Instead of 1 Predator, you have a total of 4 that make an on-screen appearance. Another change that was made was the human survivors were random people brought together to survive. Now, from a story standpoint, this could have created interesting plots and character arcs to make the film more intriguing and added depth to the motivations of our human protagonists. However, most of the characters are two-dimensional at best. They have no proper motivation or any substantial reason to stick together, aside from working as a team to get back to Earth. While one can look at this as a way to build up the characters' teamwork skills, that is to say, as the movie progresses, our protagonists have to put aside their differences in order to work together and ultimately survive. This doesn't happen. In the end, most of the characters are cannon fodder for the Predators to wipe out in different ways, and any kind of teamwork is minimal, and the traps that are set for the final Predator at the climax of the film are set up by the main character Royce, and Isabel helps by getting one shot on the Predator before being incapacitated for the duration of this battle. Compare this now to the original movie. In the first film, it's established that Dutch's team has a good relationship with each other. Each of them has their own quirks and personality traits, and while you don't get to learn everything about these characters, the filmmakers put great effort into showing the audience that these soldiers can function and cooperate in extreme situations. Even as the Predator starts picking them off one at a time, they know that sticking together is the best chance to survive. And one of the most important parts is that you cared about these characters. The movie has you invest in them, and you feel sad when they die. The same cannot be said for Predators, or at least not in the same way that the 1987 film did. Though I will say at the very least, this film did expand on the Predator mythos as well by adding the idea of a blood feud between the different kinds of Predators, at least as far as the live-action media goes. And over the years, fans including myself have been able to overlook some of these flaws and enjoy the film for what it was. It was an okay film that didn't destroy the lore of the series. That wouldn't come until the 2018 film. Looking back, most fans can probably agree that the Predator films went downhill after Predator 2. Before Predators, you had the AVP films that essentially sunk both franchises, at least as far as the films are concerned. This is why we haven't seen another AVP film since 2007. And since then, we've had Predators, Ridley Scott's Prometheus and Alien Covenant, and now in 2018, we have The Predator. Look guys, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I hated The Predator. If Aliens vs. Predator Requiem left a foul taste in my mouth, then The Predator was the equivalent of going on an overnight Taco Bell binge with a bottle of Jack Daniels going on a Six Flags roller coaster ride. Don't worry about a thing, it'll be fine. To call this a Predator film is a fallacy. While previous films kept the basic premise of predators coming to Earth to hunt humans for sport, this movie bastardizes that simple concept by giving us this piece of dialogue, which does more harm for the Predator franchise than anything that has come previously.
I told you how they take people's spines, right?
Yeah, for trophies.
Yes, yes, from the strongest, smartest, most dangerous species on every planet they visit.
Collecting survival traits from the most high-end specimens.
I think they're attempting hybridization.
Leave it to Hollywood to screw up and complicate a simple premise about an alien species that hunts life forms for the fun of it. One of the major flaws with this plot point is that it creates many holes in the logic of this series. Predators, as depicted in the many forms of media, are considered to be among the best hunters in the universe. In some cases, they consider themselves as a perfect species. Adding on to this is that any hybrid that utilizes the DNA of the predators are considered abominations that need to be wiped out. Proof of this can be seen in AVPR, as well as some of the AVP video games where the Pred alien, which is a cross between an alien and a predator, is referred to as the Abomination. Another piece of evidence is in the video game Predator: Concrete Jungle, where one of the main antagonists, Hunter Borgia, has combined predator DNA with his own and turned him into a human-predator hybrid. Man, talk about a roided-up jock, huh? The predator you play as, Scarface, yes, that's his name, look it up, is tasked with eliminating the mutant Borgia and claiming his head as your trophy to redeem your past transgressions. So the overall point is that predators hybridizing themselves with other species is a direct contradiction to their character. And let's not forget to mention that they're taking the DNA of lesser beings in their eyes and combining it with their own to make themselves the ultimate hunters? Even though they already consider themselves to be the ultimate hunters?
What the fuck?
Do I even need to talk about how bad the humor is at certain points? Because this movie's humor is about as enjoyable as getting a prostate exam. Of course, humor is inherently subjective. What one person may find funny, another might find to be a crap joke, for lack of better words. With that said, I think it's safe to assume Shane Black took his character Hawkins way too seriously. Every joke in this film was on par with the pussy jokes of the first film, minus the humor and appropriate timing. And mind you, Predator movies always had jokes. Some were funny, others, well...
So I go in for my physical, right? And the doctor says, I need a semen, stool, and urine sample. I say, gee, doc, I'm in a big hurry. Can I just leave my underwear?
With that in mind, Predator was never a comedy. It wasn't even a horror comedy. When you think horror comedy, the first thing that comes to mind is Evil Dead or Tucker and Dale vs. Evil. With those films, comedy was part of the plot. It was one of the driving forces in those films. Predator, at its roots, as previously stated, was the combination of the cheesy 80s action films and sci-fi horror. The silly one-liners and balls-to-the-walls action was expected, but when the Predator itself started killing, the tone shifted. The jokes were over, and the movie took a dark and serious turn. Speaking specifically on the first movie, essentially you could split it into two parts. The beginning was the typical action film that we're familiar with. The second and third half of the film became the slasher horror type akin to Friday the 13th, with a single mass killer racking up a body count. The difference is that the movie wasn't cheap about it. It took the killing seriously. There were no slutty females that get killed in brutal fashion, nor were the characters dumb, one-dimensional nobodies that you didn't care about. This was a family of soldiers that cared for each other and watched their backs. The stereotypical planks of wood commonly found in slasher films were not found here. The problem with the 2018 film was that it was too self-aware. It took the Predator franchise and turned it into a gag with what can only be considered to be fourth wall breaking jokes, like this sorry excuse for humor.
A predator kills its prey to survive. I mean, what you're describing is more like a bass fisherman.
Well, we took a vote. Predator's cooler, right? Fuck yeah.
Bass fisherman. The Predator, a dangerous extraterrestrial hunter that took skulls and spines for trophies and decorations, has been relegated to an episode of Duck Dynasty. Great. With all this in mind, it's safe to say that the Predator franchise is in desperate need of a new film that, at the very least, is better than all the other sequels that have come before. Cut now to modern day 2021, where, let's just say, things could have been better. The most recent installment in the Predator canon was 2020's Predator Hunting Grounds, an asymmetrical multiplayer game developed by Elphonic. While the game itself doesn't have a story mode, it has audio tapes that can be found in-game that expands the story of the first two films and 2018's The Predator. The game also brings back Dutch. We get voice lines recorded by Arnold Schwarzenegger as he explains where he's been since the first film. While I can appreciate this addition to the story overall, this isn't a movie, and not every Predator fan plays video games, so their exposure to this information is inherently limited as a result. Now, let's get into the meat of this video. Earlier this year, the plot synopsis for the new Predator film being developed was leaked. The movie, as of right now, is still being worked on despite the news of a lawsuit getting underway between Disney and the writers of the first film, Jim and John Thomas. If getting word that there is now a lawsuit happening with the Predator franchise wasn't enough, the plot leak for the new Predator film is something akin to the pain of watching Star Wars The Last Jedi. Yeah. One of the biggest issues movies and other forms of entertainment are experiencing today is political correctness and social agendas being pushed by different groups of people, all in the name of diversity and inclusion. Now, on the surface, this doesn't seem bad at all. Most people have no problem with having people with different backgrounds involved in entertainment. But if you really investigate what's being said about diversity and inclusion, there's one common theme that keeps popping up. Certain groups of people are being oppressed by the evil boogeyman known as the straight white male. That's right, the big bad, the Thanos, no, the Sauron of the real world. This is the face of ultimate evil. And if you're not being lectured to about white privilege and the sins of white people, then it's about the evil of toxic masculinity. Because God forbid a straight man would have the audacity to hold a door for a lady, be as ripped as Arnold Schwarzenegger, or worse, eat meat. Yeah, that's the problem too, apparently. The point is that political correctness and calls for diversity and inclusion is the Trojan horse to infiltrate, change, and ultimately destroy anything certain groups of people do not like or agree with, in order to make it how they want. Basically, it's the one ring to rule them all. Because in modern day 2021, if your movie has a straight white male as the lead, there's a problem. Captain America is a straight white male, like he's always been? How about a group of racially and sexually diverse Captain Americas? Why do we need all these different versions of the same character? Well, it's quite simple. Hollywood and the entertainment industry are creatively bankrupt. Instead of creating new characters with these diverse backgrounds, you have to tokenize pre-existing characters because you know damn well that if you were to create new characters with the BS identity politics forced in, they won't sell. Brand recognition and marquee value are what they are banking on to shove their political agendas in these entertainment media, while making money at the same time. You know, it's funny that people that constantly preach about how you shouldn't judge people on their skin color, gender, or sexual orientation are becoming the very thing they claim to be against. Now, at this point, you're probably wondering what any of this has to do with Predator and the new film that's on its way. Well, for context, I'm going to read to you the plot leak and break down why, for the namesake of this video, there's a bad moon on the rise. This comes from avpgalaxy.net. The story will follow Key, a Comanche woman who goes against gender norms and traditions to become a warrior. Many years ago, in a time before any Europeans had ever encroached on their lands, the Comanche people had a well-defined society and gender norms. Key is very close to her younger brother Tabe, who is being groomed as a leader. As capable as any young man in the tribe, Key has always been a teacher and source of inspiration for Tabe. In the Comanche way, she is Patsy, the elder sister that has helped to shape him. Key is a truth teller and has insight that others do not. A tomboy, she wants to prove herself in the masculine world of the Comanche. When danger threatens them all, he sets out to prove that she is as capable as any young warrior. So, to start off, the idea of setting a Predator film in pre-colonial times is something I've always wanted to see. This stemmed from my enjoyment of a little film called Apocalypto, directed by Mel Gibson. And if you haven't seen that film, I highly suggest doing so. During my multiple viewings of this film, a thought that kept popping into my head was, what if a Predator was in this film? For those who have seen the film, you can imagine why that question would pop into my head. And aside from the fact that the film would be unlike anything we've seen up to now, the idea of a Predator, a tribal-esque warrior, going against natives that are similar in that aspect, seemed like a perfect match. In many ways, the two are identical, with one difference being that one is human and the other is an extraterrestrial monster that kills for sport. Needless to say, when I heard that the next film would be set in this time period, I was beyond excited. Then I read goes against gender norms and traditions to become a warrior. And you can imagine my shock when reading that a major plot point in this movie is about a young woman being oppressed by her male counterparts, and how she wants to prove that she can be as strong as them. Now, in all fairness, some could look at this and say,
"But spooky clutter, you overly complicated misogynistic armchair critic. It's true that many societies had a patriarchal way of thinking, and thus the idea of a woman wanting to prove herself to become a warrior is a positive idea. It isn't pushing some kind of political agenda. It can provide a great story and character arc and inspire young women."
Well, theoretical fellow armchair critic, the problem is that this movie is being made in modern day 2021, where things like going against gender norms and traditions is code for
smashing the patriarchy.
Now look, the idea of a female-led Predator film isn't the problem. If you wanted that, then why not make it to where your lead woman has already obtained the status of becoming a warrior, and the adversity she has to overcome is not from her own people, but from the alien hunter that's now threatening your village and its warriors? You know, because this is a Predator film about an ET that hunts humans for sport? And to add insult to injury, how the hell would a 19-year-old child stand much of a chance against a creature that is far superior in strength and intelligence? I mean, we're talking about an average 19-year-old native girl here. She's not Wonder Woman, or even Alice from the god-awful Resident Evil movies. The first film had Special Forces soldiers. They are the ideal characters that could stand the best chance against a dangerous foe like the Predator. The second had gang members, police officers, and secret government agents with freezer weapons. The third film had a ragtag combo of mercenaries. And the fourth film had soldiers and more secret government agents. Now, excluding the stupidity of 2018's The Predator, the only reason the humans of those films were able to survive their respective encounters was based on luck, quick improvisation, and the Predator's overconfidence and underestimation of their prey. The idea of having a 19-year-old going against a Predator being able to hold her own is like putting a 10-year-old in a fight with a chimpanzee armed only with a knife to defend themselves. It's unfair and unrealistic, especially when compared to other human survivors in the history of this franchise. It would make more sense to have an older, seasoned female warrior going against a Predator, as it would be more believable given what we know about the series. The only way this 19-year-old will stand a chance is if they severely nerf the Predator to the point where it would barely act like the hunters we've seen in previous movies. If this child has to prove to her village that she can be a warrior, this could imply she has little training at that point, which makes me question how she would even be considered a worthy opponent. Again, if she was a seasoned warrior with a set of skills, then the Predator targeting her would make more sense, as this is the creature's MO, to target worthy prey.
But now, let's throw in some nonsensical plot of how toxic masculinity is holding the protagonist back and she has to fight the Predator, and show her toxic male companions how
she don't need no man.
Shut the fuck up.
Did Hollywood writers and directors forget that they're supposed to be making entertainment and not lecture the audience about the evil masculinity or whatever other social injustice they want to complain about? You could say that this is one of, if not the major factor as to why many comic books and their film adaptations are failing. These big media corporations are putting agendas first instead of entertainment. And you know, it's a shame that movies today have to lecture everyone about everything wrong with society. It used to be that movies were an escape from the BS of the real world. From witnessing the struggles and victories of a small rebellion against an evil empire, to seeing invincible action heroes mow down waves of disposable minions, movies gave us that much needed relief from everyday life. It inspired people to achieve goals in life. Characters like Luke Skywalker showed the audience that no matter where you are in life, you can be part of a much larger world and never give up on your dreams. That no matter how bad someone may be, if you love them enough to show them a better path, they can be redeemed. Now, you can't go one step without seeing another film show why men are the scum of the earth, and movies these days just make these iconic characters look like old buffoons past their prime. It's the okay boomer meme put to film to make people laugh at the expense of legendary icons that defined generations. But it's not as laughable as someone trying to convince me that Ghostbusters 2016 was a good addition to the Ghostbusters franchise. And I find it interesting how these same people conveniently ignore or talk shit about movies like Alien and Aliens, or even the first 2 Terminator films, that show the progression of female characters from timid and afraid to ultimate badasses that didn't need to beat down the men around them just to be as strong and brave as they were. Man, I miss these kinds of movies. So, in conclusion, I have very little hope that this movie will be successful. On top of the fact that there is a possibility that this film will not be getting a theatrical release and is going straight to a streaming service, the plot leak and now the lawsuit tells me that Predator 5, or codenamed Skulls, is dead on arrival. And the worst part is that this movie had an interesting time period to be set in. And once again, Hollywood is going to piss away another beloved franchise and be left in the dustbin of history. Of course, when this film comes out, we'll be sure to review it, cover it, do all that. And I hope that, in the end, that I'm wrong about all this. Because at the end of the day, I love the Predator series. It's one of my favorite franchises of all time. And the last thing I want is for it to fail. The problem is that you have greedy corporations that don't care about these franchises, only what money they can make from it while appeasing the politically correct NPCs that don't actually care. Because at the end of the day, these people don't care about these franchises. They claim they do, but everywhere you look, every corner that you turn, you see beloved characters getting tokenized, bastardized, and completely changed from what they originally were. And if it's not about the characters being changed, it's about the story itself being changed. And that's what's really spoiling all of these beloved franchises, because, as I said previously, Hollywood is creatively bankrupt. They can't come up with anything new, or they could, but they won't, because they're trying to make money off of the franchises that did make money in the past, with the exception that this time they're going to inject their political agendas to try and gain in that extra audience, while at the same time losing the audience that made the franchises good in the first place. But, despite all of these problems, I do have some hope for the future, because eventually everything is going to shift, and we're going to see a change. This politically correct era is going to end like things in the past have ended. It's just a matter of time. Once these movie corporations and studios realize that they're pushing away the people that would actually make them money while at the same time giving good products that we would support, they're going to very soon realize that these people that they're trying to appease don't actually care about their films, and they will fail. Let's just hope that they realize it before it's too late. Then again, maybe it's already too late, but who knows. So thank you guys very much for listening. Let me know your thoughts on this whole Predator situation, and if you guys like this style of video. And a special thanks goes out to Kyle Curtis Flett and Mother Moeller, part of the C-File Special Agent tier on Patreon, as well as a happy anniversary to the first Predator film that came out in June of 1987. So with that all being said, thank you guys very much for your support. And until next time, fellow investigators, remember, the entertainment is out there.
And it ain't